Defending Israel with David Harris on JBS is made possible in part by a generous gift in memory of Eric and Mira J. Spector, the Paul and Lynn Late Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation,
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and this is Defending Israel. In the last year we've had many extraordinary guests. Today is no exception. And I think you'll be fascinated by the conversation that you're about to listen to with a woman named Sarah Idan. Sarah, hello and welcome.
Thank you for having me, David.
I think it's important for those of our JBS viewers who may not know you to go back to the beginning. You were born in Iraq, am I correct?
Yes, Baghdad, 1990.
And you were born to a Sunni Muslim family, is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we established you in Iraq in 1990. Here you are in 2024 and you're living in the United States. Don't take us through every year, but what happened? Why did you leave Iraq? And where did you go in the first place?
The first time I left Iraq to the US, it was in 2009, and I left because of what was happening in Iraq, the war, the civil war, basically the Iranian regime taking over and oppressing Sunnis, and not just Sunnis, every other minority. And I worked for the US military when I was 18, and I got my green card at 19, and then that's when I came to the US. But even after I came here, I was going back and forth to see my family who stayed in Iraq at the time. So it wasn't until 2017 that I wasn't able to go back to Iraq at all, and my family had to flee the country.
Okay, so 2017 is a year when also many people around the world first heard your name, and that was because you were representing Iraq in the Miss Universe contest, which took place, I believe, in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And something very special happened there. One photograph changed the world and maybe changed your life. Can you tell us about what happened?
I was doing a photo shoot, and I saw this girl cross the room who seemed really nervous about coming and talking to me, which was very strange at Miss Universe because, everyone wanted to meet and be friendly. And I waved at her, and then she waved back. She was hesitant, but then she came over and she said, "I'm sorry. They told us not to talk to any of the Arab countries." And I said, "Who told you that?" And then she showed me her sash and it said Israel. And I asked her, I said, why did they tell you that? And she said, because they don't want peace with us, and they don't want to talk to us, and it might be awkward. I said, I don't care about politics. We're here. We're supposed to be ambassadors for peace, and we're supposed to set a good example. And I felt really bad when she told me that. So I wanted to prove to her that I didn't have any issue with her. I took a selfie with her and we posted it, and we said peace and love from Iraq and Israel. And, I remember just sitting down with her, asking her questions about her country, Israel, how life is for her there, all of that. And we became really good friends. And then I go to sleep and I wake up, and it's basically everyone in Iraq has gone insane. The Miss Iraq the Miss Iraq organization, they basically called me. I found like 100 calls from them, from my family, from like strange numbers, and they said the minister of, I believe it was tourism, who is responsible for the Miss Iraq organization, called them, yelling at them and saying he would take their license. And they showed me pictures that they took of them taking their banners or whatever you call it, you put in front of a business, on the street. So they did not want people to know this is where the Miss Iraq organization was. They took it down, and they told me that I needed to write a statement where they told me to delete the picture. And my family at the time also called me. They said they got death threats, but they told me to keep the picture. And they said, it's okay, we are leaving. Don't worry about us. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing amazing. But the Miss Iraq organization had an issue. And I told them, I've already posted the picture. There's nothing I can do about it. If I delete the picture, then it will look like I'm someone who has a weak character and doesn't even know what she's doing. So the best thing I can do, I told them, I said, first of all, I see nothing. I tried to explain to them. I said, I see nothing wrong with me taking the picture with Miss Israel. And they said, you're not, they said, this is your views. If you don't have a problem with Israelis, but you're not representing yourself, you're representing Iraq. And I said, I'm sure there are many Iraqis like me who don't have a problem. They said, well, the government has a problem, and you're there to represent the government, and the government said you need to take it down. And I still refused. And then they said they would call Miss Universe and tell them they took away my title and I can't compete, because we had 2 weeks, I believe, or it was 2 weeks and a half before the televised competition that you would see on TV. So I told them, I said, listen, it will make me look like an idiot if I took it down. The best thing I can do is make a statement and say I do not support the Israeli government policies in the Middle East, and I do not mean to intend, I do not intend to hurt the Palestinian cause. And then they wrote the statement for me, and they made me post it at the time. And of course, I deleted it the minute I left the Miss Universe pageant, because to me, I was there, but I wasn't really I didn't even have any freedom. Like, I'm there. It's supposed to be about women empowerment. And they did the opposite. Right. They tried to take away my voice, put the men's voice and the government voice instead.
So, Sarah, this was 2017.
Yes.
And then the next year, 2018, was when you and I first met. And that was when we arranged
in Jerusalem.
arranged a secret surprise visit for you to Jerusalem, to come on stage in front of thousands of people at the American Jewish Committee Global Forum, from one side of the stage, and from the other side of the stage, who came to meet you on the stage? Your friend, Miss Israel.
Yes.
And that was your first visit to Israel, was it not?
It was my first visit to Israel.
And what were your reactions and impressions of that first visit?
Well, first of all, I always tell people this, by the way, whenever I do an interview or whenever anyone asks me about, my life and what happened, I always say this. If it wasn't for AJC, probably you wouldn't see me today doing what I'm doing. And that's the reality. Because you guys, I remember it was Avital.
Avital Leibovich was our director in Jerusalem.
Yes.
For people who may not know that.
Oh, okay. So I spoke with her on the phone, and I remember she said one thing to me that really, because in the beginning I didn't even, I wasn't interested in going. I was afraid. All my friends here were telling me, Sarah, if you go to Israel, that means you're done with the Arabs. You can't go back to any Arab country. You can't work with Arabs. And at the time I was working with Arabs. I was making music in Egypt. So it was a really difficult decision. But I remember she said one thing to me, and she said, Sarah, we desperately need you. We don't have a single person from your country that can just come and say, hey, we want peace. And I said, are you serious? Not a single Iraqi have been to Israel? And she said, no one can come, no one can talk about this. And all I could think of in that moment is that I was privileged because I had a US passport and I had a home here in the United States. So I said yes, and I came, and that trip really did change my life. It changed me as a person. It changed my mentality. It educated me. And I'm just so glad I did it, because I think if even I can only imagine, for example, let's say, this is me, the same person who took that picture with Miss Israel and who wanted to approach an Israeli and be friends with an Israeli, I don't think that my views would be the same as today. So if I hadn't gone to Israel, if I hadn't witnessed it firsthand and have seen Arabs and Muslims and Christians and everyone living together, working together in harmony, something we really lack in the Middle East. I never seen it in Iraq. I never seen it in Syria, in Egypt, anywhere else. So I remember it was actually the first day when I landed in Jerusalem, and I was staying at the hotel, and the hotel manager was an Arab Muslim. His name was Mustafa. And he came to me and he said, "Hey, welcome here. My name is Mustafa, if you need anything." And I looked at him and I said, "What are you doing here?" Because that's how
Right.
that's how ignorant I used to be. I thought it was a Jewish state. It was only Jews. And then he said, "What do you mean, what am I doing here?" I said, "You're a Muslim, right?" He said, "Yes." I said, "And you live here?" He said, "Yes, sir. There's so many of us. Like, what are you talking about?" And I remember I told him, because right before I came on the trip, I actually had, which is really sad, I had a friend who was Palestinian who lived in DC. And I remember before I went to Israel, I didn't understand much about the conflict. And I told him, I said, "Can you please explain to me what is going on?" He explained it to me. He did not explain it well.
I could imagine.
Let's just say that. So when I went there and when I saw that Palestinian Arab Israeli guy and I talked to him, and I asked him, I said, "How do you feel about Israel?" And he said, "We love it here. We have good jobs. We make good money. The people on the other side, they don't even make as much money as we do. It's really safe." I said, "Well, what is the problem then?" And then he said, "Al-Fasa'il al-Musallaha," which means the armed militias. He was talking about Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and anyone who is standing in the way of peace. And that really helped me understand the picture better.
And by the next year, Sarah, was 2019, your Iraqi citizenship was revoked. Is that right?
In 2019, that is correct. After I went to speak at the UN with the UN Watch
Right.
in Hillel Neuer.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about two issues. One issue was Israel and why it's important to make peace with Israel, and also pointing out the anti-Semitic teaching that we were taught in Arab and Muslim countries. And I remember at the time I said, today Arabs, they have more common interests with Israel than they do with Iran, and you need to make peace because you have a common enemy. And the other speech that I had was about Iraq. And I also pointed out how the Iranian regime was oppressing and killing my people. The fact that so many of us, especially Sunnis, but also Christians and Yazidis, everyone has been displaced. And they did this on purpose, hundreds, thousands of them. This is something I don't think the world even cares about, which, again, shows the hypocrisy of what's going on, because, I guess the whole world knows that Palestinians are displaced according to them, but who cares about Iraqis, right? When we do it to our own Muslims with Muslims,
Right.
No one cares.
Right.
So I talked about that, and I talked about the dictatorship that we had in Iraq and all of that. And because of these two speeches that I gave, the Iraqi government revoked my citizenship. It was after that. And also it was a couple of months after, I believe, is when they put out the law that any Iraqi who have relations with Israelis online or offline, it would be criminalized, and it would be considered treason, and they would have a death sentence.
Yeah, it's quite a story and an amazing courage on your part, Sarah. I need to ask you, because so many young people in America today seem so angry at America. You are a naturalized citizen, and just as my wife, who came from Libya, came to America and says Americans don't appreciate what they have because they've never lived without what they have.
That is very true.
Can you just spend a moment talking to our audience about what being an American means to you today in the year 2024?
To me, it's not just about 2024. It's always. I've been here since 2009, and for me, being in America means I feel safe and I feel like a human being. I have full rights. I don't care what people protest here. I think it comes from a place of privilege, and they're just angry and they're taking out their anger on the government, but they don't really understand how privileged they are. For someone like me who came from Iraq, who didn't have a right to speak, I didn't even have a right, and until today in Iraq, you can't say you don't support the current Iraqi government. You can't criticize Muqtada Sadr. You can't criticize Hassan Nasrallah. And this is something that Americans, they take for granted, that we have freedom of speech, freedom of rights, equality, everything. And I just don't understand why they hate this government so much. But I do understand that the Islamists, along with the communists and every enemy of the United States, have invested a lot of money and time into what's the opposite of education? I don't want to call it education, but brainwashing students on campuses and telling them your country is a colony, you've colonized people, you murder people, your country is awful, you are awful, you're awful for being white, you're awful for being this and that. And that is a huge amount, like it's so easy for young, impressionable minds to, especially when you are a teenager and or when you're early in school and you're still learning, it's easy for you to believe that. And if your teacher, your role model, the person you're looking at for advice, the one who can decide whether you can advance and develop or not, or stay in your that school year, that holds a lot of power, and they did that. And they did not only do it through campuses, but they did it with the media, even with Hollywood, even in the streets, everywhere. They made it a culture, a self-hating culture, hating your country, hating your government. And I think what all these people have in common, the people who hate the US and who are non-Arab, non-Muslim, who did not come from our countries and understand our history, what they all have in common is ignorance of the world. And like you look at Iraq, like look at our empires. Do you think how did we spread? How did we have the Babylonian and the Akkadian and Sumerian and Assyrian, all these empires? How did they go? Did we just walked in and say, hey, we want to have a land here and we want to do this? No, we it always started with war. And it's the same thing for the United States. But here's the difference. Whether now you look at the Middle East, and by the way, if you look at the Middle East, the entire Arab world it's colonizing. It was a colonizing nature. The same thing with Islam that reached all the way to China and India, into Europe, all these countries. Like how did we expand? We expanded by colonizing culture, colonizing land, and forcing people to be part of it. The difference between our colonization and the US colonization is that the US actually stopped, and it gave people rights, and it provided them a wonderful life. And the colonization of Arabs, of Islam, did not do any of that. And this is where those students, those people who hate their country so much, they need to take a look at that and just understand the level of hypocrisy that they are, they are trying to convince the world that this is the right thing, and it's not.
I certainly hope a lot of people, including young people, will watch what you just said. It's very important, Sarah. We have about 8 or 9 minutes left, and I've got 1,000 questions for you, which we won't get to. But as we record this segment, it was just about exactly a year ago that October 7th happened. Can you recall your first reaction? And also, as I remember, you went to Israel not long afterwards.
Yes.
Why did you choose to go, and what do you want the world to know, as the world seems to forget what happened on October 7th and only looks at Israel's reaction on October the 8th or 9th or 10th? Tell the world.
I'll tell the world on October 7th. First of all, I still have many Arab, Iraqi friends, Muslim friends, and I watch them. I watch their reaction. I watch the social media reaction. I watch the media reaction of the Arabs. They didn't care. Not only they did not care when they saw the actual footage of Hamas kidnapping women in their bloody pants, clearly indicating sexual violence, killing people, killing innocent people, kidnapping babies, all of that, they turned blind eye. They turned blind eye. And while I was posting that, they were attacking me in the comments. Some people went as far as excusing it and saying that even, I'm sorry, I forgot the word for sex slave in Arabic, the sabaya, they call them sabaya. And some of them, they were explaining, some of them were women actually. And that is the scary part. They were explaining that this is how Islam should be. And they did everything according to Islam. They excused it. And the other group of people who are more modern and everything, they kept quiet. But when I tell you the majority celebrated, and when I say the majority, like imagine this, imagine having like Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt posting, "Today the victory is with you," on the day that Hamas massacred people. Those were the stars in the Middle East, our biggest stars with millions of followers, posting the Palestinian flag and picture of Hamas and saying, quoting Quran and saying, God, victory is with you, God is with you. And the day that Israel responded, all my Arab friends, except maybe for one, I kid you not, they all unfollowed me and attacked me. Some of them went as far as making posts and say Sarah is defending the genocide of Gazans. Where were you when I posted about what happened when Hamas attacked Israelis? You were quiet. And why were you quiet? Because you accepted it. You wanted that. So again, I don't know how the world can understand this, but I know it because I know the people and I speak the language and I talk to them. But there is definitely, bias against Israel. There is definitely lack of sympathy and empathy and just any human regard when it comes to it's a Jewish person.
I was going to ask you, Sarah, briefly. When these Arabs say, no, we're just against Israel, after all, we're Semitic, we can't possibly be anti-Semitic. How do you respond to that one?
You know what, that doesn't matter. I lived in Iraq. I was being displaced. I had family being murdered by other Semitic people. That doesn't mean anything. Shia and Sunni kill each other. That doesn't make you, just because you are Semitic, you don't get a pass on being a murderer, on wanting genocide. So that's the lamest thing I could hear. And you know what? This is why, by the way, I told many of my friends, I said, maybe it's time to change it to Jew hate. Maybe it's time to change,
right.
Because, at the time they had this term because the people in Europe, they were Semitic and they were in Europe, which is not Semitic, which is Caucasian. And I understand why they created the term, because of the Holocaust and all of that and trying to avoid that. But whoever did it, they forgot that there are many Muslims who also have the same hatred. They also participated in the Holocaust and they helped Hitler and they also kicked out the Jews from Arab lands. So,
right.
Yeah.
And the last big issue, Sarah, before we have to wrap it up, which you've referred to, but I want to focus on, is Iran. Because as we see it, Iran is the center of the challenge in the Middle East. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis are all arms and legs of Iran, and certainly in Iraq, as your native country, as you said, Iran has largely dominated the country. So what's your message about Iran, and especially about American policy toward Iran? Are we getting it right in Washington vis-a-vis Iran, or do we have to do something different?
Of course, I think everyone knows at this point. Everyone knows, and if you disagree, you are just an insane person. Our approach to the Iranian regime have been completely wrong. I've been warning the US administrations for the longest time about the Iranian regime and why not to go through with the nuclear deal. And I think we can all understand that the only reason October 7 happened is because of how much money the Iranian regime received from the US and from other countries. And this is exactly why we were warning you, because we knew that if you give them money, they're going to use it for terrorism. I know this because I've watched it happen in my country. I've watched it happen in Syria. And you cannot keep feeding the monster. And then once there is a war and other countries respond to the aggressors, then you tell the other countries to de-escalate and try not to go to a full war. I will say this though. I am kind of relieved that I feel the Biden administration, I thought it would be worse. I will tell you that. Thank God they have been supportive, but have they been supportive to the extent that they should be? I don't think so. And they really need to work on that, and especially in the coming days when Israel goes into Lebanon and then more countries get involved, and Iraq will probably get involved as well. They need to be more supportive. And for the Arabs, this is the time to make peace with Israel. I don't know, what are they waiting for? Like Saudi Arabia, what's going on between them and Iran? Iran have been trying to take out Saudi Arabia, remove Mecca and replace it with their regime, with their Shia Islamic regime, and all of that, attacking them in Yemen and attacking the Arab Gulf or the Persian Gulf, but where there are the Arab lands. All of that, like it's we can't go deep into it. It's a lot to talk about, but the main point is all Arab countries are threatened by Iran, and Iran they pose a real threat on Arabs. So I don't understand why. I've been watching social media, and even the Arabs in Syria, the Sunnis who've been persecuted and murdered and displaced by Hassan Nasrallah, so many of them, they said, oh, this is amazing. They were celebrating. But then again, they were still anti-Israel. And it's really sad. So this is why the U.S., we need all the support we can get from the U.S. And in the end, it's the same enemy. Israel is just the first chapter in their book. Israel is basically the protector of the U.S. interest and ideals and all of that in the Middle East. After it's done, they're going to come for us. And we need to take it seriously.
Sarah, we're recording this on the eve of the Jewish New Year, 5785. And your message that it's time for other Arab countries to make peace with Israel, to recognize who their real friends are and who their enemies are, to call on U.S. leadership to stand strong, is absolutely perfectly timed. So I want to thank you, Sarah Idan, for being with me on Defending Israel. JBS
My pleasure.
JBS viewers, you've just heard from an extraordinarily eloquent, very brave and courageous Iraqi-born American citizen who has a very important message for all. So I hope you've enjoyed this show. I hope you'll share it with others and take her message to heart. Shana Tova U'Mituka, a happy and sweet year to JBS viewers. Thank you, Sarah Idan. This is David Harris, Defending Israel.
JBS is made possible by viewers like you. This high holiday season, as a thank you for your tax-deductible support of our programming, you can request a signed copy of David Harris's new book, On the Front Lines. Simply visit our website for details. We thank you for your kind support.